Backstage news on a huge title versus title match at WrestleMania 38. Goldberg is back in WWE, returning on SmackDown. Ronda Rousey selects her WrestleMania 38 opponent. So much more news when it comes to the departure of Shane McMahon. All this and more in today's WWE news. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there is plenty of news stories to get into today. So let's start off talking about that big title versus title match possibly going to happen at WrestleMania. Now, as you can see right there, we know that it's going to be Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar for the WWE Universal Championship. That's already set in stone. That's already happening. But this rumor of possibly the match being for both the WWE and the Universal Championship continues to rumble on and on. That's because Brock Lesnar and Paul Heyman are reportedly pushing for a big title versus title match at WrestleMania 38. Now, of course, as I mentioned, last week's Raw saw Brock Lesnar name Roman Reigns as his WrestleMania 38 opponent, but he also warned Bobby Lashley that he will be the WWE Champion by WrestleMania 38, making the match a title versus title match. This led to Lesnar being added to the Elimination Chamber match in Saudi Arabia later this month. Now, according to the Wrestling Observer newsletter, there's now a feeling within creative that WWE Chairman and CEO Vince McMahon will make the call to go with the title versus title match between Lesnar and Reigns, which explains why he put Lesnar into the Elimination Chamber match. Now, there are reportedly people within WWE who are pushing for the title versus title match to happen, including Brock Lesnar and Paul Heyman. Now, it must be said, that's important because if you believe the reports when it comes to the Royal Rumble, it was Brock Lesnar that essentially got his way over Shane McMahon, over Vince McMahon's own son. So if Brock Lesnar's pushing for something to happen, chances are it's going to happen. Now, reportedly, there's also a feeling internally that McMahon is leaning in the direction of the title versus title match, which means whatever was planned for the original WWE Championship match at WrestleMania is off. Now, it was reported at one point WWE actually had no WrestleMania opponent planned for Bobby Lashley after they had him win the championship at the Royal Rumble a couple of weeks ago. Now, it was noted that if WWE does have plans for both titles for both titles on the road to WrestleMania, and there are a number of twists and turns to come, obviously we're going to have a better idea of what plans they have in place once we get out of the Elimination Chamber later on this month. But if you've watched the channel enough, whenever I spoke about this issue, I've always felt this was the direction they were going to go in, because going back to the Rumble, I didn't see anything that was there for the WWE Championship that was really box office or big. I really didn't see it. And it does make you wonder that, it's so transparent, isn't it? It's so transparent that WWE just doesn't have a clue when it comes to the WWE Championship. I spoke about this coming out of the Rumble. I think I even said it in my post-Royal Rumble stream I did. WWE has two matches, basically, they knew they wanted to do for WrestleMania. They wanted to do Brock versus Reigns for the Universal Championship, and they wanted to do Ronda Rousey versus Charlotte Flair. They've achieved that, and then they kind of looked around and went, I don't know what I want to do for the rest of it. And now, then this is what happens every year. Then they start panicking. We will get to a point where it's maybe 3 weeks out of WrestleMania and the card's still not finalized and they're still just making it up as they go along. And I look on the Raw side of things and say, okay, Bobby Lashley's the champion. He's a heel. Which babyface is he going to face for that title realistically? The only person I could think of was maybe Seth Rollins. And I don't even think he's a babyface. I mean, he kind of was coming out of the Rumble, but then if you watched Raw last week, he seemed still pretty much as a heel, I guess, and he might face off against Kevin Owens anyway. I don't know, and I think it's the same with the creative team. I don't think they know either. So it seems pretty obvious, isn't it, that I think it's just going to get to the point where Vince McMahon goes, you know what, we don't actually have a plan. And if we don't have a plan, let's just put title versus title. It makes the match bigger. And also as well, I think it's worth pointing out, this isn't like a first time ever match. Lesnar and Reigns have faced off multiple times before. Now granted, it's a way, way, way different dynamic because it's babyface Brock versus heel Roman. You've got Paul Heyman in the corner of Roman. But they've still done the match before. They did it at Crown Jewel in October. And obviously there were different circumstances when it comes to the finish, and a lot's happened between now and then, but it's still the same match, and this is still your WrestleMania main event. You still need to add something different. You still need to add stakes to make it even more important, just for the fact that it's WrestleMania, not the fact that it's not just a first time ever match, but it's WrestleMania. It's the biggest event of the year. So I think title versus title makes sense. I don't know if that would be just they hold both bouts and eventually one of them drops them, or if it's a unification match. Personally, I think it should be unification. I think they should go back to the original brand split idea in 2002, where you had two separate brands and then you had an undisputed champion who would be on both shows. I think the USA Network would be very happy with that, frankly, because Roman Reigns is winning this match. So if it's title versus title, Reigns becomes the undisputed WWE, whatever they want to call it, champion, and he's on both shows. USA Network would love that. They absolutely want Roman Reigns on their show. They're desperate for it because of the ratings factor alone, and it's the hottest thing going in WWE. And I think as they build up to having Reigns versus The Rock next year at WrestleMania 39, because that's the hope, that's the plan, but it's the hope of WWE. How do you make Roman Reigns versus The Rock even bigger? You've got Reigns versus Rock's a big match anyway. Add in the Universal Championship, okay, it goes up a level. Add in the fact that Roman Reigns hasn't lost since August 2020, goes up a level. Add in the fact that Roman Reigns is the longest reigning Universal Champion in WWE history, goes up another level. Add in the fact that Roman Reigns is the undisputed WWE Champion, he's the champion in WWE, goes up another level. Add in the fact that it's probably going to be The Rock's last match. I mean, it has potential to be maybe the biggest pay-per-view, premium live event, whatever you want to call it, that WWE has ever done in terms of attendance, in terms of buy rate, in terms of just social media metrics, everything. And that stems from laying the foundations now. That stems from laying the foundations this year. So for me, it makes a lot of sense. But whether or not they'll go in that direction, as I said, coming out of Elimination Chamber, that will be the one to really determine. If Brock wins the Chamber, and that's obviously the direction they're going in. If he does win the Chamber, though, it just goes to like, why? Why did Bobby beat him at the Rumble? I guess you could then argue the only reason at that point that Bobby Lashley beat him at the Rumble was just to do the turn. That was it. It was just to do the Paul Heyman turn. The WWE Championship was secondary and got relegated to the point where Paul Heyman's turn on Brock Lesnar was more important than the championship. And if that is the case, unify it, because it's basically worthless at this point. But we'll wait and see when it comes to that one. Obviously, Friday night on SmackDown, it was obviously way out there, but everyone knew it was going to happen. But Goldberg made his return during SmackDown's post-Rumble edition of the show on Fox. The show opened with the Bloodline, obviously that being Universal Champion Roman Reigns, SmackDown Tag Team Champions the Usos, Paul Heyman coming to the ring. Heyman praised Reigns, explained why he turned on Brock Lesnar at the Rumble. To be fair, great promo, when isn't it? By Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman always does a great promo, always does a great act. And he said that everyone was going to acknowledge Roman Reigns, and then out came Goldberg. Goldberg got a pop. The problem is, it's difficult to judge. It's difficult to judge if anyone gets a good pop nowadays, because that crowd noise is so piped in, it's ridiculous. Now, I'm sure Goldberg got a big pop. I feel like he did get a big pop, but go and watch the Ronda Rousey promo from Raw last Monday. Oh my goodness. Talk about, I mean, it was worse than, you remember when SmackDown was taped and be on like a Friday or a Thursday, whatever day it was on at that period of time, and they just had the worst canned cheers. It was so obvious. They have that during a live show now. It's one of the worst things to spill over from the Thunderdome, is that you just got this terrible, just ambient crowd noise, even to the point when they just don't want silence, to the point, but like, and I understand silence, like maybe when it comes to a pop, but silence when someone's talking, they're standing there in the ring before they've talked. Of course there would be silence. Everyone would go silent because they're waiting for the person to talk. Who, when someone's just about to talk, starts making loads of noise and cheering? That's illogical. It makes no sense. It's a big tangent I've gone on. Anyway, Goldberg comes out, keeps his promo quick, says he acknowledges Reigns, but only has his next victim. He then proposed a title match between the two at Elimination Chamber and said that Reigns is next. Now, I don't think it's been actually confirmed as of yet, has it? Either way, it's going to be Reigns versus Goldberg. It might have been confirmed. Either way, it's Reigns versus Goldberg at Elimination Chamber. The match was originally scheduled for WrestleMania 36, of course, in 2020 before the pandemic hit, and then Reigns took time away because of the pandemic and being immunocompromised, etc. I have a couple of thoughts on this. First of all, I don't know what it is. I mean, it's got to the point where not only are Goldberg's matches lazy, but the booking's lazy at this point. The guy, WWE's use of Goldberg, basically for the last, 3 years, is that he comes out, gets in a champion's face and says, I want a championship match, and then he gets it. I get he's Bill Goldberg. I get that he's a WWE Hall of Famer, but where is the logic in that? I would understand it if his last few championship matches he'd won and then he'd relinquished or vacated the championship, but he hasn't. His last few championship matches he loses. He loses all of them. He always loses the championship matches. Obviously, he beat The Fiend 2 years ago, which was a disgrace. But then he loses the title to Braun Strowman at WrestleMania. He then lost to Drew McIntyre at the Royal Rumble. He then lost to Bobby Lashley at SummerSlam for the WWE Championship. Granted, he beat him at Crown Jewel, but you're talking like his last 3 championship matches he has been in, he has lost. What right does he have to walk out to the ring and say, I want a championship match, and he just gets it? and I get it, it's pro wrestling, and I get it, it's WWE, and if you look hard enough, you will see there's no logic in all of this, but it's just baffling. It really is baffling. The saving grace is that it doesn't matter. It really does not matter, because it's Elimination Chamber, it's not WrestleMania, Goldberg is not winning, and I know people said, well, we said that about Goldberg versus The Fiend at Super Showdown. That's true. But Roman Reigns is not Bray Wyatt in terms of popularity or politically. He's not dropping the championship to Goldberg at Elimination Chamber. That would be wild. That would be insane. It's not happening. And, I mean, it's not going to go more than 3 or 4 minutes. I mean, the way the match will go, barrel ring, Goldberg hits maybe 1 or 2 spears, maybe even a jackhammer. Reigns kicks out. Gets up, Reigns hits a couple of spears of his own, maybe locks the guillotine in, and of course, this is Goldberg's last match in his contract as well, so maybe Reigns beats the hell out of Goldberg, and then Goldberg disappears. That's the way the match will go. So, I'm not totally against it for Elimination Chamber. If there's one place where it should happen, it's probably Elimination Chamber. Goldberg just works the Saudi matches, and maybe a SummerSlam, that's what he does. So, it is what it is at this point. I'm done getting angry about it. Speaking of SmackDown as well, SmackDown we saw the reveal, if you want to call it that, of Ronda Rousey's opponents for WrestleMania 38, that being Charlotte Flair, the SmackDown Women's Champion, as expected. Now, the final segment of SmackDown on Friday featured Flair coming out. Sonya Deville joined her. Deville talked about how she'd heard from Raw Women's Champion Becky Lynch, who informed her of Rousey's decision to challenge for the Red Brand title at WrestleMania 38. Deville said she expected the contract to be signed, and then Flair began to rant on the potential mom versus mom match at WrestleMania. Flair then named Sasha Banks as her WrestleMania 38 opponents, since Rousey had apparently chosen Lynch. Flair said WrestleMania would be the worst night for the boss, and she'll have the contract for the match waiting. That's when the music interrupted. Out came Rousey for her first ever SmackDown appearance. Rousey said last time she checked, she won the Royal Rumble, and she's the only one that can name her opponents. She agreed with Flair that becoming a mother did change her. She didn't fly across the country in a winter storm with her baby just to have a chat. She's here to teach the family business of ass kicking, and Flair is the one person she owes an ass kicking to. Easy for me to say. Rousey had a few more words for Flair, saying she's not special, she's just first for her WrestleMania match, and declared she will see her at WrestleMania 38. This led to a bit of a confrontation, a back and forth between them, so it's Rousey versus Flair for WrestleMania 38. The promo was just kind of the same as the Rousey promo on Raw on Monday, I felt, which was very flat. WWE, bless them, tried their best to find some logic in there, but there just wasn't any, in my opinion. Like, they had an opportunity to maybe throw in some genuine logic as to why Rousey would choose Flair over Lynch, and they didn't. They just sort of said, I'm going to choose you. Why? Because I am. I'm going to choose Charlotte Flair. Whereas the logic, obviously the match that I think more people wanted was Becky Lynch versus Ronda Rousey. I've said that Becky Lynch versus Bianca Belair is more important in terms of making a star, and then we'll get Ronda Rousey versus Becky Lynch next year, so it's not as if we're not going to get that match. But they had an opportunity to try and sort of weave in some logic, and they just didn't. What was Rousey's last match in WWE that wasn't the Royal Rumble? It was at WrestleMania 35 main event. What happened in it? Becky Lynch pinned Ronda Rousey, and her shoulder was up. Logic would state that Ronda Rousey would come back and go, you didn't pin me, I want my title back. So so she picks Charlotte Flair. Why? I don't know. I don't know. But that's the match they want to do. That's the match they want to do this year, and they've got there at this point. So they're going to try and find some logic in there. Speaking of feuds, we have some update when it comes to possible feuds for Roman Reigns. WWE reportedly still has plans for Drew McIntyre to challenge Universal Champion Roman Reigns at some point. Obviously, there's been lots of speculation on the opponents for Roman Reigns after he faces Goldberg at WrestleMania, then Brock at WrestleMania 38, or Goldberg at Elimination Chamber rather, and Brock at WrestleMania 38. A McIntyre feud versus Roman Reigns on SmackDown has been rumored for some time, but the Wrestling Observer newsletter that feud will happen down the line. It was noted that McIntyre is still very much in the plans for an opponent at Roman Reigns at some point. Before McIntyre's recent injury issues, there had been talk of doing McIntyre versus Reigns early in this part of the year as one of Reigns' feuds on his way to Lesnar. It's believed the match will take place now later on in the year instead of rushing it anytime soon. So I think that makes a lot of sense, to be honest. I mean, Reigns versus McIntyre had been planned since, November? Well, whenever the draft was, really. Whenever, October last year, that's always been the plan. Now it's just a case of filling it in, or fitting it in, rather, because you look at it, as I just said, it's Goldberg for Chamber, it's Lesnar versus WrestleMania. Bear in mind, we know Reigns is winning all of these, because, again, the plan is to have Reigns versus The Rock at WrestleMania next year. So we know that it's going to be Goldberg at Elimination Chamber, Lesnar at WrestleMania. I don't even think I'd have McIntyre for Backlash or anything like that. I'd have McIntyre versus Reigns. I'd have it for SummerSlam. And look around. What other fresh matches, and I know McIntyre and Reigns have faced off once before in recent years. Obviously, they faced each other at WrestleMania 35 and all that kind of stuff, but in terms of this version of Drew McIntyre and this version of Roman Reigns, that was at Survivor Series a couple of years ago. So I would save it for SummerSlam. Build up Drew McIntyre. He has felt a bit cold recently, not just because of the injuries, just because in general. I'd build that up, and then post WrestleMania, I mean, just you can find someone that can do a 1 month program on SmackDown, right? Just find someone. Do it with Shinsuke Nakamura. something a little bit different, and save Drew for SummerSlam. That's what I do. There is this story, and obviously there's lots going on when it comes to Shane McMahon and him being let go by WWE. But there is way more about the Shane McMahon departure, and all of it is just kind of wild when it comes to Shane McMahon's alleged behavior and how people feel about him, and it's very eye-opening, to be honest with you. So, in an update, those people that were in the arena for the Royal Rumble on Saturday noted that Shane McMahon was actually really self-centered and made things all about himself and his own ideas. This comes from a report by Wade Keller of PW Torch. It was also said that Shane didn't get caught up on what the plans were for the match. Apparently, Shane McMahon doesn't watch WWE television. I don't blame him. But he didn't keep up with the storylines and obviously had no idea what was happening on television, what was building to certain moments, which is a bit of a problem when you're the lead producer and writer for the match. So everyone was saying to him, why are you saying these ideas? That doesn't fit with what we've been doing on television at the time. Shane also allegedly, quote, pulled the McMahon card with other men's Royal Rumble match producers, wanted things done his way. He wanted to have a big moment in the match. It reportedly got so bad, there were heated arguments with people who felt like they could push back on Shane's behavior. The situation was described as chaotic by multiple sources, and McMahon's actions reportedly caused a lot of stress and strife, distracting people from the tasks at hand. It was also said that Shane just went, quote, way overboard with his actions. It just was reportedly really, really bad. Shane reportedly disagreed with Vince McMahon's plans for his Elimination Chamber booking as well. Because remember, he was meant to be working Elimination Chamber and WrestleMania. And how Vince McMahon wanted to execute those plans when it came to his character. The plans were laid out to Shane, but he didn't like them. So he reportedly pushed back on those plans. That was where Vince reportedly finally had enough, leading him to cancelling all plans of Shane. Regarding the back and forth on Saturday, Dave Meltzer added on the Wrestling Observer radio show that Shane had his ideas, but Vince McMahon would veto them, and Lesnar would push for other things. It's reported that Lesnar, quote, got his way in the men's rumble, and word is now that Lesnar got to do a lot of what he wanted, while Shane did not. Shane complained to a lot of people and talked down to others, including Jamie Noble. Besides Shane and Noble, it's been reported that other producers were the likes of Adam Pearce, Sean Devine, and Chris Park, all of which Shane was arguing with. And Shane McMahon coming in to produce the Rumble has happened the last few years. Vince brought Shane in to help produce the Rumble for the third year in a row, actually, but it's likely that this will be the end of his Rumble creative work. It was described as, quote, dad doing a favor to his son, despite the fact that Shane's creative ideas have been laughed at behind his back for years, and the fact that some say Shane doesn't have a good creative wrestling mind. I saw that in this report, and I think, again, that comes from Dave Meltzer, and I went, wow, that's like heavy stuff, saying that Shane was just the lead producer because his dad was doing him a favor and he's been laughed at essentially behind his back. That's heavy. That's really heavy. Shane, obviously, I mean, I'm hardly, shocking people here, but he obviously pissed a lot of people off, a lot of people off with his actions, and it's very surprising. It was also said that it's not sure, we're not sure if Shane's been released from a talent contract or if he was just sent home and removed from all plans, but it's believed among some that Shane will not be involved with WWE for the foreseeable future. So there's a lot there, and I've seen all sorts of people going, is he going to go to AEW or is he going to start his own promotion? No, Shane's just going to be done. And I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. I mentioned when Shane was involved in the Rumble and involved in WrestleMania, Shane McMahon coming back in 2016 was great. Even that they butchered. I mean, it was great when he jumped off the Hell in the Cell, but the storyline with him and The Undertaker made zero sense and logic and all that kind of stuff, but it was fun. And he had some good matches. AJ Styles' opening match, WrestleMania 33, was tremendous. I really enjoyed it. And even the stuff with Daniel Bryan coming back, that was all right. But, there was a time, and it's not 2022. It's over. And somehow we've got to that destination. Maybe not the way that Shane would have wanted it, but that's the case. Finally, I do want to talk about WWE when it comes to Peacock, because WWE last week had their Q4 2021 earnings calls, and they were very happy with their relationship with Peacock and their numbers that they've been doing on the streaming platform. So WWE has found an increase in viewership with Peacock as the main home of the WWE Network in the United States. The company believes they've outperformed on the streaming platform. Nick Khan, of course, WWE President and Chief Revenue Officer, revealed during the Q4 2021 earnings call that several events from 2021 saw a significant increase in viewership from what they did on 2019 in the WWE Network. So these are some of the examples. Viewership for Money in the Bank from July 2021 was up 25%. Viewership from SummerSlam in August was up more than 30%. Viewership for Extreme Rules was up 20%. Viewership for Crown Jewel in October was up 75%. Viewership for Survivor Series in November was up almost 25%. Regarding the 2022 events so far, it was noted that Day 1 is one of the most highest viewed events in the history of the Peacock platform. I think it's curious they haven't given any numbers about that. But viewership for last Saturday's, or a couple of Saturdays ago's Royal Rumble was up 45% from the 2020 Rumble. Chief Brand Officer Stephanie McMahon also later revealed that the Rumble this year was the most active WWE event on the Peacock app so far. So they're very happy with it. They're very happy with the numbers. I spoke about this when the Peacock deal was announced. That was, nearly a year ago, about a year or so ago now. That it made total sense because the network's subscriber count just was flat. It was 1.8 million, 1.4 million. It was in that area between 1 and 2 million subscribers, and that was it. So they were only ever going to do, maybe like 1.5, 2 million views per pay-per-view, per premium live event, whatever they want to call it. When they said that all the WWE Network is going to be on Peacock, Peacock already has 20 million subscribers? Maybe even more than that. It's the home of NBC programming. So, of course, the viewership is going to go up. It's a no-brainer. And the money they got paid for it, they got paid money and their viewership has gone up. That is, you can criticize, Nick Khan for however you want to do it, but it's good business. It's smart business. And they're seeing how it's going to pay off. I think the really interesting thing now is going to be, how are the numbers going to look like over the next 2 or 3 years? Logic would say they're going to continue to go up because more people are going to sign up to Peacock. If they're a bit flat, then again, they found their ceiling there. So I think that's the interesting thing there. Nevertheless, as always, guys, plenty to talk about. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Be sure to like and subscribe to Wrestling News 365. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.